When I was 19, I inherited my grandparents' house when they passed away. It was built in the late 1800s and stood as one of the largest houses built in the state during that time. I quickly learned that it was a perfect house for throwing parties. It was tucked away behind acres of farmland, so the noise would never be an issue. I hosted a few parties prior to this one, and I soon became known around school as the guy who threw the best parties. School was about to start back up, and it was the perfect weekend for a party. The temperature had finally cooled off to a comfortable warmth after a long summer, and nobody had anything on the agenda in the weeks leading up to the semester. Since I had a massive backyard and plenty of space, I decided to throw together a last-minute party to enjoy the final nights of summer. Within the first hour of the party, I was greeted with a swarm of cars parked in front of my house. The music was blasting, and the people were having a great time. I couldn't have been more pleased. As the night went on, more people showed up, and I started worrying that some of these people weren't even invited. On top of that, the mass amount of people in my backyard actually made me concerned about the noise for the first time. Between the music, laughing, screaming, and talking, it sounded like a sold-out concert. I decided to ask my guests to tone it down a little bit, so that I wouldn't have to deal with any neighborhood complaints. Little did I know at the time, that wasn't the only sound that was going to disturb the peace that evening. At around 11 p.m., I noticed an old beat-up pickup truck parked outside my house. I watched from the side of the backyard as a male figure got out of the truck and started walking up to the front of the house. Not knowing if he was someone I invited, I ran around the side and met him at the front door, just as he was about to knock. As soon as I laid eyes on him, I knew I never invited him. He looked at me for a second, then said, "Who's the owner of this house?" I told him that I was, but as I said that, his expression grew more stern. "You need to send everyone home right now." I looked at him in confusion, but quickly realized he must have lived in one of the nearby houses and was upset about the noise. I told him I'll take care of everything, and he walked back to his truck. Not wanting to have to deal with the police, I started going around and telling people that they need to be more quiet again. But between the blasting music and drinking, my efforts went with no effect. That's when I started to get a little worried, realizing I had no control over the party I was hosting. Right when I was just about to tell people to leave, somebody started shooting off fireworks in the backyard, and that was the final straw for me. I started going around to people one by one and telling them that they had to leave. Several people who I'd never seen before were very rude about my request, making it extremely difficult. After maybe 30 minutes of trying, everyone was gone. When I went back inside, I noticed that both the lights upstairs and downstairs were all turned on, which I knew were not on earlier. I had left the doors to the house locked to make sure that no one would come inside at any given point, since my grandpa had built an outdoor bathroom on the side of the house. My heart sank as I realized that someone had definitely come inside my house. I couldn't figure out why though, because every single door was still locked. I started pacing around the rooms and checking for stolen items, but after frantically doing this for 10 minutes, nothing was missing. I started thinking how someone could have possibly gotten inside. Then it hit me. The garage door was left open, and the door leading inside was locked, but I left a spare key under the doormat in the garage. My heart started pounding as I raced to the garage to check for the spare key. When I flipped up the mat, I felt myself turn pale. It was gone. I honestly had no idea what to do. Out of the hundreds of people there, it was impossible to narrow down the culprit. Whoever it was still had my key, and I couldn't get a new lock overnight. I went to bed to get some sleep, but set my alarm clock so that I could get a new lock first thing in the morning. After tossing and turning for a while, I was able to pass out, mostly from the sheer exhaustion of the day. I went into a deep sleep until I was suddenly awakened to a loud noise that sounded like a bang. My eyes shot wide open, and I felt my fists clench as I thought about the garage door. My fear turned into a mix of anger, as I thought about someone really having the nerve to do this. I walked downstairs to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and made my way to the garage door. As soon as I approached it, I noticed that it was still locked. It didn't make any sense, unless the person was already inside, which made my fear overpower my anger. Realizing the person could be anywhere inside, I grabbed my keys to get out of there. As I was contemplating running out the door, I started to think about what I was doing. I woke up to what I thought was a loud bang, and instantly assumed the person with my spare key was back. I realized that they couldn't have gotten inside, especially since my garage door was closed and nobody knew the passcode. As I thought about it some more, It started to dawn on me that it could have been a dream, especially since I went to bed worrying about it. Now debating whether it was my paranoia or not, I looked outside the front window. There were no cars there, and the motion detecting lights were off. I felt a huge sense of relief, really starting to think that I made it up in my head. Just as a final precaution, I walked back to the double doors facing the backyard and looked outside. I didn't spot anything unusual until I caught something out of the corner of my eye that made me freeze. The doors going down to the old wine cellar were flipped open. Seeing that was enough for me to get into my car and call the police. I sat at the end of my street waiting for the cops to arrive. They searched my entire house top to bottom, and it was empty. As I started to feel a sense of relief hearing the news, an officer told me something that terrified me. In addition to the damaged lock on the cellar doors, my room was completely destroyed. My shelves and bed were kicked over, light bulbs were shattered, the closet was ransacked, and worst of all, there were knife imprints carved all over the walls. I felt myself shaking after hearing that, and I was definitely not going back for the rest of the night. Instead, I checked myself into a hotel and decided to handle the situation the next day. Within the next week, my dad and I had repaired the damages, swapped the locks, and added a security system to the house. The added protection helps me feel safer now, but the night still lingers in the back of my head every day. I still don't understand why someone would have done this, and I can't help but think about what would have happened if I was still sleeping when they got in. This happened to me during my first year of college, when I was attending Florida State University. Being that I was from out of state, I spent a lot of my freshman year trying to navigate through the new environment and make friends, since I had none going in. After a few weeks of starting my English class, I was befriended by a guy named Tyler. Tyler seemed friendly, and he really made an effort to get to know me. On the last day of finals, he invited me to a house party that night that he was hosting. He mentioned that he even invited a few of my newer friends that I met through school, and after realizing we had mutual friends, I was all in. Up until that point, I'd never been to a party before, and I was excited at the prospect of socializing with new people. During the hours leading up to the party, I was feeling a mix of both excitement and nervousness. He told me to come at 8, so I made sure I arrived at the address on time. As soon as I pulled up to his house, I noticed that there were only a couple other cars in the driveway. I got a bit worried that he gave me the wrong address, but I decided to ring the doorbell anyway, just to be sure. I waited in mild suspense, hoping that I got the right house. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps coming to the door, and it flew open. Tyler greeted me with a warm smile, and he welcomed me inside. I think he noticed the confused look on my face as I scanned the vacant living room, because he quickly said that everyone was downstairs. As he led me downstairs, I noticed that it was completely quiet. There was no music, talking, or anything. When I reached the bottom step of the stairway, I was met by 2 much older guys who I had never seen before. Tyler said they were his roommates, but they weren't in college anymore. I introduced myself, and also asked them if I came too early, since I definitely felt like I did. That's when one of Tyler's roommates spoke up, saying that there were more people on their way. As he said that, I instantly noticed that they were all acting a little nervous, but I kind of felt the same way, given the awkwardness of the situation. Suddenly, the 2 older guys turned and walked into the bathroom across the room and shut the door behind them, leaving me and Tyler alone in the room. The atmosphere felt tense and painfully awkward. After still just standing there, I started to get a feeling that something was off. After maybe 10 minutes, nobody else had showed up, and I was really starting to get scared. In a panic, I told Tyler that I had to go outside and call my friend really quick. Just as I turned around to head up the stairs, I felt Tyler grab me by the arm. That was when I completely lost it. What follows after this was a complete blur, but the little parts I can remember genuinely horrify me. Tyler threw me into a wall and started choking me, but I was able to hit him enough times to knock him off balance. I have absolutely no recollection of running up the stairs and getting to my car, but I did. For whatever reason, I didn't even think about calling the cops. Instead, I drove straight to the police station. After finally calming down and coming out of the shock, I gave them the address, and they immediately dispatched units to the house. Well, unsurprisingly, they were gone when the police showed up. I was assured by the officers that it was just a matter of time before they caught them. The next day, I received terrible news. The house had been up for sale for the past 2.5 months. This put the entire investigation at a dead end. Right after learning that, they searched the school records for a student named Tyler, fitting the description I gave them. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I learned that Tyler was never enrolled at FSU. Ever since that night, I've been diagnosed with PTSD and been going to therapy multiple times a week. Although I shouldn't think this way, I feel like it'll never get better until those 3 people are caught. Tyler's plan was extremely elaborate and well planned out. When I asked my friends that Tyler claimed to know, they all had no idea who he was. He must have found them through my followers on Instagram. I was a target, and he clearly wasn't alone in the planning. I still live with the anxiety each and every day, knowing they're out there somewhere. I was looking forward to a great night. The air was filled with anticipation, and I was excited to get to my friend's high school house party after homecoming. I went with a group of my friends who all had dates, but I was the only one going solo. My boyfriend broke up with me the week prior, accusing me of cheating when I was nothing but loyal. He had some anger issues and trust problems, so it was probably the best for us to split up anyway. As soon as the dance ended, my friends and I piled into a car and drove to the party. Right when I got inside, I was greeted with the pulsing sound of music that I could feel in the bones of my feet. Most of the people weren't even there yet, so the majority of the house was filled with red Solo cups and food. Being the only girls here at this point made us somewhat feel out of place, but everyone welcomed us with beaming smiles and hugs. Once more people started showing, I noticed that a few of my friends had gathered outside on the porch, so I made my way over to join them. We chatted aimlessly about the boringness of the dance and other random stuff. Soon enough, it was time to really get the party going. Most of the people were on the first floor, dancing around and playing Pong. There were also a few people in the basement, playing video games and listening to their own music. At some point, my friend and I ran upstairs to use the bathroom and talk about a few people who were annoying us. Suddenly, while we were in there, the lights went out, making the entire room pitch black. We froze, realizing the music had just been shut off as well. Everything was completely silent for a second, until I started to hear hushed conversations about people talking about a power outage. I dragged my hands against the wall until I felt the door handle, and we made our way back down in the darkness. After the initial shock had worn off, the party began to thin out, since the entire house was completely dark. My friends and I were just about to follow suit, but before I could reach the front door, I heard a girl screaming at the top of her lungs. It sounded like it had come from the basement, and a few guys went downstairs to investigate. A chill ran down my spine as I realized something wasn't right. Seconds later, we heard someone yell, "Call 911." I stood at the top of the stairs looking down to the basement, and I could see the flashlight beams of people's phones darting around the walls. I was with a group of 6 or 7 people, and we all decided to go downstairs and see what happened. I tried to silence my steps, but the floorboards creaked with every step we took. As soon as I got to the bottom, my heart raced as I saw a girl laying on the floor with a stab wound. Several of my friends were trying to put pressure on it to control the bleeding, but she seemed to be unconscious. Everyone was talking at the same time, making it impossible to make anything out. We didn't know who stabbed her, and we certainly didn't want to find out. My friends and I ran back up the stairs and out the door to the car. Right when we made it outside, I saw someone standing in the driveway staring at us, but we didn't take any time to see who it was. We sprinted as fast as we could to the car. As soon as I opened the door, I heard a familiar voice shout my name, immediately sending shivers down my back. It was my ex-boyfriend. He had a look of insanity on his face, and he was holding a sharp object in his hand. My friend floored it out of there and we drove back to her house, where we locked ourselves inside and sobbed. Once I got myself together, I called the police and told them that I think my ex-boyfriend just stabbed someone at a party. They had already sent units to the house, and sure enough, he was found hiding behind a bush on the side of the house. He was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. It turns out, he was the one who stabbed the girl. When asked why, he told the police that he thought it was me. Hearing that made me break down into tears, realizing everything that he did was because of me, and I should have been the victim. Thankfully, the girl who was stabbed was treated and made a full recovery. Instead of facing jail time, he was sent to a maximum security psych ward after pleading insanity. His goal wasn't just to kill me, but to make it as terrifying as possible, he completely destroyed the electrical panel to the house, making it more likely for him to not be seen and get away. I'm disgusted that he wasn't put in jail, but I'm just glad he's off the streets.